The scent of cinnamon and pine needles should have been comforting. Instead, it made my stomach twist into knots so tight I could barely breathe. The restaurant was one of those places I'd never be able to afford on my own. Crystal chandeliers dripping from vaulted ceilings, white tablecloths so crisp they looked like they'd cut your fingers, and soft jazz humming beneath the murmur of wealthy conversations I'd never be part of. I shouldn't have come. My fingers twisted the worn strap of my second-hand purse under the table, the leather cracked and peeling in places I'd tried to hide with a marker. The red dress I wore, borrowed from my roommate Sarah, who'd insisted with that pitying look in her eyes that I deserved something nice for once, felt too tight across my chest, too short on my thighs. I could feel every eye in this place sliding over me, cataloging exactly how much I didn't belong. Across from me, Derek checked his phone for the 4th time in 10 minutes. "Sorry," he muttered, not looking up. His cologne was too strong, something expensive that couldn't quite mask his obvious disinterest. "Work thing." I nodded, taking a sip of water because it was free, and I couldn't afford anything else on this menu. The prices didn't even have dollar signs, just numbers that made my throat close. When Sarah had set up this blind date, she'd promised Derek was a catch. Successful. Handsome. Looking for something real. What she hadn't mentioned was that he'd taken one look at me and decided I wasn't worth the effort. "Listen, Emma." Derek finally set his phone face down on the table, and I knew what was coming. I'd heard this speech before, in different words, different restaurants, different men, who all wore the same expression of polite disappointment. "You seem really sweet, but I don't think this is going to work out." The Christmas lights strung along the windows blurred in my peripheral vision. I forced a smile, the same one I wore when customers at the diner were rude, when my landlord raised the rent again, when my mother called drunk at 3 a.m. asking for money I didn't have. "That's fine," I said, proud of how steady my voice sounded. "I understand." I didn't understand. I never understood what was wrong with me, what invisible deficiency made men look through me like I was glass. Derek stood, already reaching for his wallet. "I'll cover my drink. You can get yours, right?" Heat flooded my cheeks. The water. He wanted me to pay for water. "Of course," I whispered. He was gone before I could say anything else, weaving through tables toward the exit without a backward glance. I sat there, frozen, staring at my trembling hands in my lap. The couple at the next table had stopped talking, and I could feel their pity like a physical weight pressing down on my shoulders. I needed to leave. Now. I fumbled for my purse, nearly knocking over the water glass. My vision swam with unshed tears I refused to let fall. Not here. Not in front of these people who already knew exactly how pathetic I was. The waiter appeared at my elbow, young, sympathetic, which somehow made it worse. "Miss, your check." "I know." My voice cracked. I dug through my purse, fingers shaking as I searched for the few crumpled bills I'd brought. $3.47. Water couldn't cost more than that, could it? "Actually," a voice said from behind me, deep and smooth as expensive whiskey. "She's with me." I froze. The waiter's entire demeanor changed in an instant, his spine straightening, his eyes widening with something that looked like fear mixed with respect. "Mr. Volkov, I didn't realize. We weren't informed you'd be dining with us tonight. That's because I didn't inform you." The voice moved closer, and suddenly there was a presence beside me, commanding and absolute. "Is that a problem?" "No, sir. Of course not, sir." The waiter practically bowed as he backed away. "I'll have your usual table prepared immediately." My heart hammered against my ribs. I couldn't bring myself to look up, to see who this Mr. Volkov was, but I could feel him. The air itself seemed to shift around him, heavy with an authority that made my instincts scream danger even as something else, something I didn't want to examine, sparked low in my belly. "Look at me." It wasn't a request. Slowly I raised my eyes. The first thing I noticed was his suit. Black, perfectly tailored, the kind that cost more than my entire year's rent. Then his hands, resting casually in his pockets, scarred knuckles that spoke of violence even as they remained perfectly still. Finally, his face. God help me, his face. He couldn't have been more than 30, with sharp cheekbones and a jaw that could cut glass. Dark hair swept back from his forehead, and eyes, ice blue, almost colorless, that pinned me to my chair with an intensity that stole my breath. He was beautiful in the way a knife was beautiful. Elegant, deadly, mesmerizing. "What's your name?" he asked. "Emma." It came out as barely more than a whisper. "Emma Clark." Something flickered in those cold eyes. Recognition? Interest? I couldn't tell. He tilted his head slightly, studying me with the same focus a predator might give prey, and I realized with sudden visceral clarity that this man was dangerous. Not in the way Derek had been disappointing, but in a way that could ruin lives. End them. Behind him, 2 men in dark suits stood at attention near the entrance. Security. They watched the room with eyes that missed nothing, hands positioned near their jackets in a way that suggested weapons. "You're alone," he observed. It wasn't a question. My date left. I didn't know why I was telling him this. I should be running. Every instinct I had screamed at me to get up and walk away from whatever this was, whoever he was, but I couldn't move. His mistake. He extended a hand toward me, an invitation, a command. "Have dinner with me, Emma Clark. I can't afford—" "I didn't ask what you could afford." His voice dropped lower, sending shivers down my spine despite the warmth of the restaurant. "I asked you to have dinner with me. This was insane. I didn't know this man, didn't know why he'd singled me out, why he was looking at me like I was something precious he'd been searching for. The rational part of my brain cataloged all the reasons to refuse. Strange man, obvious danger, the way everyone in this restaurant had suddenly stopped pretending not to stare at us. But when had rationality ever gotten me anywhere? When had playing it safe ever resulted in anything but disappointment? "Okay," I heard myself say. His lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile, and he took my hand. The contact was electric, his palm warm and calloused against my cold fingers, his grip firm but careful, like I was something fragile he didn't want to break. He led me through the restaurant, and I watched in amazement as people actually moved out of our way. The hostess appeared with menus she hadn't been carrying before, leading us to a private corner booth I hadn't even noticed, separated from the main dining area by frosted glass panels and velvet curtains. This was his usual table. This was where men like him ate, hidden from the world, conducting business I probably didn't want to know about. He waited until I slid into the booth before sitting across from me. And even then, one of his security guards remained visible through the glass, a silent sentinel. "You're scared," he observed, picking up the wine list without looking at it. "Should I be?" "Smart girl." He finally met my eyes again, and this time there was something almost approving in his gaze. "Yes, you should be. But I won't hurt you, Emma. That's not why you're here." "Why am I here?" The waiter returned. A different one, older. His hand steady as he poured wine I hadn't seen ordered into crystal glasses. He disappeared again without a word, and I realized this entire interaction had been choreographed, expected. How often did this man come here? What kind of power did he wield that made people move like chess pieces at his unspoken command? "You're here," he said, picking up his glass and studying the dark red liquid, "because I wanted you here. Do you know who I am?" I shook my head. "Dmitry Volkov." He watched my face for recognition, and I tried to keep my expression neutral even as my stomach dropped. I'd heard that name before, whispered in the diner by customers who thought waitresses didn't listen, mentioned on late-night news broadcasts I caught between shifts. Organized crime, Russian Mafia, violence wrapped in expensive suits and charitable donations. I was having dinner with a monster. "I should go," I whispered, but I didn't move. "You should," he agreed, "but you won't." He was right. God help me, he was right. Because despite everything my brain was screaming, despite the danger radiating off him like heat, there was something in the way he looked at me that made me feel seen for the first time in my life. Not invisible, not forgettable, essential. Why me? The question escaped before I could stop it. "You could have anyone. Why did you stop me from leaving?" Dmitry set down his wineglass with careful precision, and when he spoke, his voice carried a weight that made the air feel thicker. Because I saw you sitting there trying not to cry, and I thought—" He paused, and for just a moment, something almost human flickered across his features. "I thought you deserved better than to be left alone on Christmas Eve." Christmas Eve. I'd almost forgotten. Tomorrow would be Christmas, and I'd spend it in my tiny apartment, alone, eating ramen and watching other people's happiness through my window. "That's not an answer," I said, surprising myself with my boldness. His eyes narrowed, but not with anger, with interest. "No," he agreed, "it's not." The waiter returned with plates I didn't remember ordering, setting them down with practiced efficiency. The food looked like art, delicate, expensive, intimidating. I didn't even know where to start. Dimitri picked up his fork, and somehow the gesture gave me permission to do the same. We ate in silence for a few moments, and I tried not to think about how surreal this was. This morning I'd been arguing with my landlord about a broken heater. Tonight I was having dinner with a man who probably had people killed before breakfast. "Emma Clark," he said suddenly, making me jump. "Where do you work?" "The Silver Spoon Diner, on 5th. "Family?" "No." The word came out harsher than I intended. "Just me." Something shifted in his expression, a recognition that made my skin prickle with awareness. He understood loneliness, this powerful, dangerous man surrounded by security and wealth. He understood what it felt like to be alone. "I have a proposition for you," he said, setting down his fork and leaning back in his seat. The movement was casual, but I could feel the predatory focus behind it, the careful calculation. My mouth went dry. "What kind of proposition?" "I need a wife." The words hung in the air between us, impossible and absurd. I almost laughed. Would have laughed if not for the complete seriousness in his expression. "You're insane." "Probably." He tilted his head, studying me with that same unnerving intensity. "But I'm also serious. I have business complications that require a certain legitimacy. A wife would provide that." "You want me to be your— what? Fake wife?" My voice rose despite my efforts to keep it steady. "You don't even know me." "I know enough." He reached into his jacket and I tensed, but he only pulled out a business card, sliding it across the table toward me. "I know you work 2 jobs and can barely afford rent. I know you were stood up tonight by a man who wasn't worth your time. I know you're alone on Christmas Eve, and that you're stronger than you think you are." I stared at the card, heavy cream paper with gold embossing, just his name and a phone number, nothing else. As if that was all anyone needed to know. "Why would I agree to this? Because I'll pay you more money than you've ever seen. Because I'll give you a life where you never have to worry about bills or broken heaters or men like Derek again." He leaned forward, and his voice dropped to something almost intimate. "Because when I look at you, Emma, I don't see someone invisible. I see someone extraordinary." My heart pounded so hard I thought he must be able to hear it. This was crazy, dangerous, absolutely insane. But his words wrapped around something desperate inside me, something that had been starving for years. "Think about it," he said, standing in one fluid motion. His security guard materialized at his side immediately, and I realized the dinner was over. He'd said what he came to say, and now he was leaving, just like that. He paused beside the table, looking down at me with those ice-blue eyes. "Keep the card, Emma Clark. When you're ready to stop being invisible, call me." Then he was gone, moving through the restaurant with his guards flanking him, and I was left alone with a half-eaten meal and a business card that felt like it was burning a hole through my fingers. The waiter appeared again, setting down a small box wrapped in silver paper. "Mr. Volkov asked me to give you this, miss. Merry Christmas." My hands shook as I unwrapped it. Inside was a key, sleek, modern, attached to an address tag for a building I recognized from the expensive part of town. A note in sharp, masculine handwriting read, "Your apartment, if you want it. No strings, no expectations. Just a place where you can think about my offer without freezing." I sat there long after the restaurant closed around me, staring at that key and wondering if I'd just met my salvation or my destruction. I didn't sleep that night. The key sat on my nightstand like a living thing, catching the yellow glow from the streetlight outside my window. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Dmitri Volkov's face, those cold blue eyes that seemed to see straight through every defense I'd ever built, the careful control in every movement, the way his voice had wrapped around me like smoke. "Can you be my wife?" The question echoed in my mind until I wanted to scream. By the time weak winter sunlight crept through my threadbare curtains, I'd made a decision. Not about his offer. I wasn't ready for that. But about the key. I needed to see it. Needed to understand what kind of man gave a stranger an apartment with no strings attached, because men like Dmitry Volkov didn't do anything without strings. I just had to figure out what they were before they wrapped around my throat. The building was in the heart of downtown. All glass and steel and doormen in uniforms that probably cost more than my car. I stood across the street for 10 minutes, clutching the key in my coat pocket, before I finally gathered enough courage to cross. "Miss Clark?" The doorman greeted me by name, and my stomach flipped. Of course he knew. Dmitry had probably called ahead, made arrangements, ensured his gift would be waiting. "Welcome. The penthouse elevator is this way." Penthouse. Of course it was the penthouse. The elevator ride felt like ascending into another dimension. My reflection in the polished gold doors showed a girl in a thrift store coat and worn jeans, dark circles under her eyes from a sleepless night. What was I doing here? What was I thinking? The doors opened directly into the apartment and the breath left my lungs. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, morning light spilling across hardwood floors that gleamed like honey. The furniture was modern but warm, soft grays and creams, nothing like the cold minimalism I'd expected. The kitchen had marble countertops and appliances I'd only seen in magazines. And through an open doorway, I could see a bedroom with a bed so large it looked like you could get lost in it. "Do you like it?" I spun around, heart in my throat. Dmitry stood in the elevator doorway, looking somehow more dangerous in daylight. He wore another perfect suit, charcoal gray this time, and his hair was still slightly damp, like he'd recently showered. The scent of his cologne drifted toward me, something dark and expensive that made my mouth go dry. "What are you doing here?" My voice came out shakier than I wanted. "It's my building." He stepped inside, and the doors whispered shut behind him. "I wanted to see your reaction. You mean you wanted to pressure me?" I lifted my chin, trying to find some semblance of spine. "Trap me up here so I'd feel obligated." "If I wanted to trap you, Emma, you'd already be trapped." He moved closer, each step deliberate and controlled. "The elevator works. The door locks from the inside. You can leave whenever you want." But I didn't move. Couldn't move. He stopped just inside my personal space, close enough that I could see the faint scar along his jawline, the way his eyes tracked every small shift in my expression. "Did you think about my offer?" he asked quietly. "I haven't thought about anything else." The admission escaped before I could stop it. "But it's insane. You can't just marry a stranger because you have business complications. Why not?" He tilted his head, genuinely curious. "People marry for worse reasons. Money, convenience, because they're afraid to be alone. That doesn't make it right." "No," he agreed, "but it makes it honest." I turned away from him, moving toward the windows because I needed space, needed to breathe. The city sprawled below us. Tiny cars and tinier people living their normal lives. What would they think if they knew what was happening up here? A waitress being offered a fortune by a criminal to play pretend? "I looked you up," I said, watching his reflection in the glass. "After I got home last night, you're not just business complications. You're dangerous." "Yes." No denial, no justification, just simple acknowledgement. People are scared of you. They should be. You've hurt people, probably killed them. My voice dropped to a whisper. "Haven't you?" The silence stretched so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "Yes." I closed my eyes, nausea rolling through my stomach. This was real. This wasn't some dark romance novel where the dangerous man had a heart of gold beneath his criminal exterior. This was a man who had taken lives, who ruled through fear and violence, who was offering me a fantasy life in exchange for what? What did he really want? Why me? I turned to face him, needing to see his expression. "You could hire an actress, find someone experienced in this kind of thing. Why a waitress who can barely pay rent?" Dmitry moved to the window, standing close enough that I could feel his body heat. He didn't touch me. but the air between us felt charged, electric, because actresses lie for a living, he said, staring out at the city. And I need someone real, someone who understands what it means to struggle, to fight for survival. Someone who won't fall apart when things get complicated. Things are already complicated. They're about to get worse. He turned to look at me, and something in his expression made my blood run cold. I have enemies, Emma, powerful ones. They're circling, looking for weaknesses. A wife, a real wife, not some hired actress, would show strength, stability. It would buy me time to handle things. Handle things, I repeated. You mean kill them? His jaw tightened. I mean protect what's mine. I'm not yours. Not yet. The words hung between us like a promise and a threat. But you could be. I could give you everything you've ever wanted. Safety. Security. A life where you never have to worry about money again. In exchange for what? Being your prop? Your perfect little wife who smiles at parties and doesn't ask questions about the blood on your hands? His eyes flashed with something. Anger? Respect? I told you I wouldn't lie to you, Emma. If you agree to this, yes. There will be appearances to maintain, events to attend, people to convince. But I don't want a prop. I want... He stopped, seeming to struggle with the words. I want someone I can trust. The vulnerability in that admission shocked me. This man who commanded fear with a look, who probably had dozens of people on his payroll. He was lonely. Just like me. How long? I asked. If I agreed, how long would this arrangement last? 6 months, maybe a year. He reached into his jacket, pulling out a folded document. I had my lawyers draw up a contract. Everything clearly stated. Your compensation, your responsibilities, your protections. I took the papers with trembling fingers, scanning the dense legal text. The numbers made my head spin. A monthly salary that was more than I made in a year, plus housing, security, a clothing allowance that seemed obscene, and at the end of the term, a settlement that would let me start over anywhere in the world. This is real, I whispered. You're actually serious. I'm always serious, Emma. He moved closer, and his hand came up to my face, fingers barely brushing my cheek. The touch was gentle, impossibly gentle for someone so dangerous. I know you're scared. You should be. But I promise you, as long as you're mine, no one will ever hurt you again. No one will ever make you feel invisible. No one will ever leave you alone on Christmas Eve. Tears burned behind my eyes. How did he know exactly what to say? How did he find the cracks in my armor so easily? I need time, I managed, to read this. To think. Of course. He stepped back, giving me space. But his eyes never left my face. Take the apartment. Use it while you decide. There's a phone in the bedroom. My direct number is programmed. When you're ready, call me. He moved toward the elevator, and panic flared in my chest. Wait. He stopped, turning back with one eyebrow raised. Why did you really choose me? The question came out small, desperate. The truth this time. Dmitri was quiet for a long moment, something complicated passing across his features. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. Because when I saw you in that restaurant, trying so hard to be strong while that bastard walked away, I saw myself. Before I became this, he gestured at himself, at the expensive suit and the power it represented. I saw someone still fighting, still hoping, despite every reason not to. And I thought, maybe if I could save you from becoming what I am, maybe there's still something human left in me after all. Then he was gone, the elevator doors closing on his confession, and I was alone in a penthouse that cost more than most people made in a lifetime, holding a contract that could change everything. I spent Christmas Day reading every word of that document 3 times, researching contract law on my phone until my eyes crossed, trying to find the trap. But it was all there, exactly as he'd said. Clear terms, clear compensation, even a clause about my safety being his primary obligation. By evening, I'd made my decision. I called the number. He answered on the first ring. Emma. I have conditions, I said before I could lose my nerve. Name them. I want to finish my shifts at the diner. Give proper notice. I won't just disappear on people who depend on me. Agreed. I want to be able to contact my friends. I won't be cut off from everyone I know, of course, though I'll provide security when you go out. That should have bothered me. Instead, I felt a strange flutter in my stomach at the idea of being protected, watched over, and I want honesty. No more half-truths. If I'm going to do this, I need to know what I'm walking into. The pause was longer this time. That's a dangerous condition, Emma. Some truths can't be unknown. I don't care. That's my price. Then you have a deal. His voice dropped lower, intimate despite the distance between us. When can I see you again? Tomorrow. I work the morning shift, but I'm free after 2. I'll send a car. I can take the bus. No. The word was absolute, leaving no room for argument. From now on, you don't take the bus. You don't walk alone. You don't put yourself at risk, do you understand? The possessiveness in his tone should have sent me running. Instead, heat bloomed in my chest, spreading through my body like wildfire. I understand. Good girl. The approval in those words made my breath catch. Get some rest, Emma. Tomorrow, everything changes. He hung up before I could respond, and I stood there in the darkening apartment, staring at my reflection in the black windows. The girl looking back at me seemed different somehow, still scared, still uncertain, but no longer invisible. I'd made a deal with the devil. I just hoped I'd survive long enough to see if salvation was worth the price of my soul. The next morning, I showed up to the diner in my usual uniform, the pale blue dress that was starting to fray at the hem, sensible shoes worn thin from too many double shifts. My coworkers greeted me with sympathetic looks, probably assuming my Christmas had been as lonely as they'd expected, if only they knew. Emma, honey, Martha called from behind the counter, her kind face creased with concern. You okay? You look tired. I'm fine, I lied, pouring coffee for the early morning regulars. Just didn't sleep well. The morning passed in its usual blur of orders and complaints and tips that barely covered my bus fare. But every time the door chimed, my heart jumped, wondering if Dimitri would walk in, if he'd come to claim me early, unable to wait. He didn't. At 1:55 p.m., I clocked out and changed in the bathroom, putting on the nicest clothes I owned, a simple black dress I'd bought for job interviews, paired with the only coat that didn't have visible holes. Through the diner window, I could see a black SUV parked at the curb, windows tinted so dark they looked like mirrors. Emma? Martha touched my arm as I headed for the door. That car's been sitting there for 20 minutes. You sure you're okay? I'm sure. I squeezed her hand, wondering if this would be the last normal conversation I'd ever have. I'll see you tomorrow for my last shifts. Last shifts? Her eyes widened. You're quitting? I got a new opportunity. I'll explain later, I promise. Before she could ask more questions, I pushed through the door into the cold December air. The SUV's back door opened immediately, and a man in a dark suit stepped out. Not Dimitri, but one of his security guards from the restaurant. He was massive, all shoulders and silent intensity. Miss Clark. He gestured to the open door. Mr. Volkov is waiting. I slid into the leather interior, and my breath caught. Dimitri sat on the far side, looking like he'd stepped out of a magazine spread. Dark suit, crisp white shirt open at the collar, hair perfectly styled. But it was his expression that stopped me. Hungry, possessive, like he'd been counting the minutes until he could see me again. Hello, Emma. His voice was liquid heat, high. God, why was I so nervous? This was just a business arrangement, just a contract. So why did it feel like I was stepping into something far more dangerous than crime and money? The guard closed the door, sealing us in, and the SUV pulled smoothly into traffic. Dimitri didn't speak, just watched me with those ice-blue eyes, and I fought the urge to squirm under his scrutiny. Where are we going? I finally asked. Shopping. Shopping? You agreed to be my wife, Emma. That means you need to look the part. His gaze traveled over my worn coat, and something almost gentle crossed his features. Not that there's anything wrong with how you look, but the people we'll be dealing with judge by appearances. I won't have them disrespecting you because your clothes aren't expensive enough. Shame and gratitude warred in my chest. I can't afford. I can. He leaned forward, closing the distance between us, and his hand found mine. The contact sent electricity shooting up my arm. That's the point of this arrangement. You don't worry about money anymore. You don't worry about anything. That's my job now. This feels strange, I admitted. Wrong, somehow. It will feel less strange soon. His thumb traced circles on my palm, the gesture almost absent-minded. Tell me about yourself, Emma. I know the facts, where you work, that you're alone. But I want to know you. Why? If this is just business, it's not just business. His eyes locked on mine, intense and unwavering. Not anymore. Maybe it never was. My heart stuttered. What does that mean? It means, he said slowly, carefully, that from the moment I saw you in that restaurant, something shifted. I told myself it was opportunity, convenience. But I don't make decisions based on how someone makes me feel, Emma. I make them based on strategy and survival. And yet here I am, holding your hand like a lovesick fool, trying to understand why the thought of you walking away makes me want to burn the world down. I should pull away, should remind him this was supposed to be temporary, professional. But his words wrapped around my starving heart and wouldn't let go. I'm nobody, I whispered. Just a waitress who can barely keep her life together. You're mine. The possessiveness in those words stole my breath. That makes you everything. The SUV pulled to a stop outside a boutique so exclusive it didn't even have a name on the door, just a discreet gold number. Dmitri released my hand, and immediately I missed his touch. The warmth and security it had provided. One rule, he said, as his guard opened the door. You don't look at price tags. You don't worry about cost. If you like something, it's yours. Understood? Dmitri, I can't— Yes, you can. He stepped out of the car, then turned back to offer me his hand. Trust me, Emma. Let me take care of you. Against every self-preservation instinct I'd honed over years of struggling alone, I took his hand and stepped into a life where everything I'd ever wanted was suddenly within reach, if I was willing to pay the price. The boutique smelled like money, leather and perfume, and something else I couldn't quite name. Luxury, maybe. The kind that came from knowing you could have anything without ever asking the price. A woman appeared the moment we crossed the threshold. Her silver hair swept into an elegant chignon, her smile professional but warm. Mr. Volkov, what a pleasure. We received your call. Natasha. He nodded, his hand settling on the small of my back, possessive and warm through the thin fabric of my coat. This is Emma. She needs everything. Natasha's trained gaze swept over me, and I braced for judgment, for the thinly veiled contempt I'd grown used to from sales associates in stores I couldn't afford. Instead, her smile widened with genuine pleasure. Of course, we'll start with the basics and build from there. She gestured toward the back of the store. If you'll follow me, Miss Emma. I glanced at Dmitri, suddenly uncertain. He leaned down, his lips nearly brushing my ear, sending shivers cascading down my spine. Go. I'll be right here. The next 2 hours were surreal. Natasha moved through the boutique with practiced efficiency, pulling dresses and blouses and pants I'd never have dared to touch. She didn't ask my size. Somehow she just knew, her experienced eye cataloging my measurements with a glance. Every time I emerged from the dressing room, Dmitri was there, seated in a plush armchair with a glass of something amber, his attention focused entirely on me. Turn around, he'd say, his voice low and commanding, and I'd obey, my cheeks burning as his gaze traveled over every inch of me. Some outfits he dismissed with a slight shake of his head. Others made his jaw tighten, his knuckles going white around his glass. Those were the ones Natasha added to the growing pile of purchases. The red one, I said finally, exhausted and overwhelmed, staring at my reflection in a dress that probably cost more than my car. It's too much. I need it. Dmitri stood, closing the distance between us in 3 strides. He stopped just behind me, his chest nearly touching my back, his reflection meeting mine in the mirror. I need to see you in this at the gala next week. I need every man in that room to know you're untouchable. His hand settled on my waist, the first time he'd actually touched me like this, and I forgot how to breathe. His fingers were warm through the silk, possessive, claiming. Why? The word came out breathless. Why does it matter what anyone thinks? Because you're mine to protect now. His voice dropped to something almost dangerous. And I protect what's mine, Emma, always. The intensity in his eyes, reflected in the mirror, made my knees weak. This wasn't just about business arrangements or fake marriages. This was something primal, possessive, and far more terrifying than any contract. We'll take everything, he told Natasha, never breaking eye contact with me. Have it delivered to the penthouse by tonight. Of course, Mr. Volkov. He released me, and I immediately felt the loss of his warmth, his presence. I changed back into my old clothes with shaking hands, hyper-aware of how shabby they seemed now, how worn. When I emerged, Dmitri was waiting by the door, his phone pressed to his ear. I don't care what Kozlov wants, he said, his tone cold enough to freeze blood. Tell him if he contacts Emma again, I'll consider it a declaration of war. He paused, listening. No, not a threat, a promise. He ended the call, his jaw tight with barely contained violence, and I realized with sudden clarity that whatever business complications had led him to need a wife, they were far more dangerous than I'd imagined. Who's Kozlov? I asked, as we stepped back into the SUV. Dmitri's expression went carefully blank. You wanted honesty, are you sure? I nodded, even as fear coiled in my stomach. Viktor Kozlov runs the Ukrainian syndicate. We've been at odds for several years. Recently things have escalated. He stared out the window, his profile sharp as cut glass. He has a habit of targeting the people I care about, making them suffer to hurt me, and you think he'll come after me. It wasn't a question. I know he will. The moment word spreads that I've taken a wife, he'll see you as an opportunity, a weakness to exploit. He turned to face me, and the raw intensity in his gaze made my breath catch. That's why I need you protected, Emma. Why I need you close. I won't let him touch you. The possessiveness in his voice should have scared me. Instead, warmth bloomed in my chest, dangerous, intoxicating warmth that made me want things I had no business wanting. What happened to the last person he targeted? I asked quietly. Dmitri's silence was answer enough. I see. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold despite the SUV's heated interior. So, I'm bait, a way to draw him out. No. The word cracked like a whip. You're under my protection. There's a difference. Is there? He moved fast, so fast I didn't have time to react. One moment he was on his side of the seat. The next he was right there, his hand cupping my face, forcing me to meet his eyes. Listen to me very carefully, Emma. I have done terrible things in my life, unforgivable things, but I have never used an innocent as bait. You are not a tool. You are not expendable. You are mine. And I will burn this city to ash before I let anyone hurt you. Do you understand? I nodded, unable to form words. His thumb brushed across my cheekbone, gentle despite the violence promised in his words. Good. He released me, settling back into his seat, but the air between us remained charged. We're going to my estate. You'll stay there until the wedding. Wedding? My voice came out strangled. When? This weekend. We don't have time for a long engagement, and the sooner you're legally mine, the better. This weekend. 4 days. I was going to marry a man I barely knew. A criminal who killed people and spoke of burning cities like it was nothing. What was I doing? The estate was exactly what I should have expected. A massive property on the outskirts of the city, surrounded by high walls and security cameras, gates that required 3 separate access codes to open. The house itself was beautiful in a cold, imposing way. All stone and windows and sharp angles that spoke of money and power. Home, Dmitri said as we pulled up the circular drive, and something in his tone made it sound like a question. It's incredible, I managed, stepping out into the crisp winter air. Guards were everywhere, discreet but present, watching from positions that probably gave them clear sightlines of every approach. This wasn't just a home. This was a fortress. Come. Dmitri's hand found the small of my back again. guiding me toward the entrance. "I'll show you your room." "My room?" I glanced at him. "Not our room?" His lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "This marriage may be business, Emma, but I'm not a monster. You'll have your own space, your own privacy. I won't force anything you're not ready for." Relief, and something that felt suspiciously like disappointment, warred in my chest. "Thank you." The interior was warmer than I expected. Still expensive, still intimidating, but with touches that suggested someone actually lived here. Books on shelves, a blanket draped over a leather couch, photographs in simple frames. My room was on the second floor, connected to the master suite by a door that Dmitri made a show of leaving unlocked. "In case you need anything," he said. "I'm a light sleeper." The space was beautiful, a 4-poster bed with soft white linens, a sitting area with a fireplace, windows that overlooked gardens currently sleeping under a dusting of snow. It felt like a dream. A beautiful, terrifying dream I couldn't wake from. "Your clothes will arrive within the hour," Dmitri said from the doorway. "Dinner is at 7. My housekeeper, Elena, will show you around before then." He paused, seeming to struggle with something. "Emma, if you want to leave, if this is too much, I'll take you home. No consequences. The apartment is still yours. The money I promised will still be deposited. Just say the word." I turned to face him. This dangerous, complicated man, who'd upended my entire life in less than 48 hours. "And if I stay? Then you're mine." Simple. Absolute. Terrifying. "And I'm yours. For however long this lasts." He left before I could respond, closing the door softly behind him, and I sank onto the bed, my legs suddenly unable to hold me. What had I agreed to? What was I doing in this house with these people preparing to marry a man who spoke of protection and possession in the same breath? My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah, my roommate and closest friend. "Where are you? You didn't come home last night. I'm worried." I stared at the screen, trying to figure out how to explain any of this. Finally, I typed, "Something came up. I'm okay. I'll explain soon, promise." Her response was immediate. "Emma, you're scaring me." This isn't like you. She was right. None of this was like me. The old Emma, the invisible waitress who played it safe and never took risks, she wouldn't recognize the woman sitting in this expensive room, wearing borrowed clothes, preparing to marry a criminal. But maybe that was the point. Maybe I was tired of being invisible. Elena appeared at 6:30, a warm-faced woman in her 50s, who reminded me of Martha from the diner. She showed me through the house with patient thoroughness, the kitchen where I was welcome to make anything I wanted, the library that housed what looked like thousands of books, the gym, the indoor pool, the security office where guards monitored every inch of the property. "Mr. Volkov is a good man," Elena said suddenly as we stood in the library, her accent thick with Eastern European vowels. "He is hard, yes, dangerous. But his heart, when he chooses to care for someone, he cares completely." "Absolutely. He barely knows me," I said softly. "Sometimes knowing comes after choosing." She patted my hand. "You will see." Dinner was in a formal dining room that could have seated 20, but held only 2 place settings, positioned at one corner so we wouldn't be shouting across an empty table. Dmitri was already there when I arrived, changed into dark slacks and a black sweater that made his eyes look even more pale and piercing. He stood when I entered, an old-fashioned gesture that made my heart skip, and pulled out my chair. "You look rested," he observed, settling across from me. "Your home is beautiful, intimidating, but beautiful. Our home." He poured wine into my glass, rich and red, probably worth more than my monthly rent. "For the next 6 months, at least. Maybe longer." The contract said, "Fuck the contract." The words were sudden, harsh, and his hand clenched around his glass. "I'm sorry, but Emma, that was crude. I need you to understand something. This started as business, strategy. But when I saw you today, in that boutique, looking at yourself in those dresses like you couldn't believe you deserved to wear them, I wanted to give you everything, not because of contracts or arrangements, but because you deserve it." My throat tightened. "You don't know me well enough to say that." "Then let me know you." He leaned forward, intensity radiating from him. Tell me everything. Your childhood, your dreams, why you're alone on Christmas. Help me understand what made you into someone so strong she doesn't even realize her own strength. So I told him. About growing up with an alcoholic mother and an absent father. About working since I was 15, trying to keep us afloat. About the day I turned 18 and left, unable to save someone who didn't want to be saved. About years of struggling alone, of invisible exhaustion, of wondering if I'd ever be more than just surviving. He listened without interrupting, his gaze never wavering from my face, and when I finally fell silent, there was something almost reverent in his expression. You saved yourself, he said quietly. That's more than most people ever manage. I didn't save anything. I'm still barely surviving, or I was, until you. Until I offered you a way out. He reached across the table, his hand covering mine. I know what it's like, Emma, to fight and scrape and never feel like it's enough. I know what it's like to be invisible to everyone who matters. His jaw tightened. The difference is, I took what I wanted, built an empire from blood and fear. You stayed good, despite everything. That's rarer than you know. I'm not good, I whispered. I'm here, aren't I? Agreeing to lie, to play pretend, for money. You're here because you're a survivor, because you recognized an opportunity and took it. There's no shame in that. His thumb traced circles on my palm. The same gesture from the car, intimate and possessive. And for what it's worth, Emma, this stopped being pretend for me the moment you said yes. The confession hung between us, heavy with implications I wasn't ready to examine. Before I could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his entire demeanor changed, going cold, dangerous, the gentle man from moments before vanishing behind a mask of controlled violence. Excuse me. He stood, bringing my hand to his lips in a gesture so unexpectedly tender it made my breath catch. I have business to attend to. Elena will show you back to your room. Try to sleep. Tomorrow we meet with the priest and finalize arrangements. He was gone before I could ask what kind of business required that look in his eyes. The one that promised death to someone, somewhere. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling of my beautiful borrowed room, listening to muffled voices from somewhere below. Dimitri's voice, sharp with anger. Other voices responding. At one point, I heard what might have been a gunshot, distant and muffled, and my entire body went rigid with fear. But no one came to my door. No alarms sounded. And eventually, exhaustion dragged me under into dreams of ice-blue eyes and promises that felt more like threats. I woke to find a white box on the chair beside my bed, tied with a silver ribbon. Inside was a simple platinum band and a note in Dimitri's sharp handwriting. This was my grandmother's. She gave it to my grandfather the day they married, after he saved her from a man who would have destroyed her. She told me once that the only real marriages are the ones where both people are willing to burn the world down for each other. I think she would have liked you, D. I slipped the ring onto my finger, and it fit perfectly, like it had been waiting for me all along. The wedding happened so fast it felt like falling. One moment I was standing in front of a mirror, while Elena adjusted the simple ivory dress Dimitri had chosen. Silk that clung to my curves before flowing to the floor. Elegant and understated in a way that somehow felt more intimate than lace and beading. The next, I was walking down a makeshift aisle in Dimitri's private chapel, my hand trembling on Elena's arm, because I had no father to give me away, no family to witness this strange union. The chapel was small, tucked into the east wing of the estate, with stained glass windows that threw colored light across stone floors. Only a handful of people attended. Elena, a few of Dimitri's most trusted men standing like silent sentinels along the walls, and the priest, an elderly man with kind eyes who seemed unsurprised by the unusual circumstances, and Dimitri. He stood at the altar in a black suit that fit him like sin, his ice-blue eyes locked on me with an intensity that made my knees weak. As I walked toward him, I watched something shift in his expression. Hunger, possession, and something softer that terrified me more than his violence ever could. When I reached him, he took my hand, his touch warm and steady, grounding me in this surreal moment. You look beautiful, he murmured, low enough that only I could hear. Like you were made for this. I don't know what I was made for, I whispered back. You were made to be mine. Simple. Absolute. Devastating. And I was made to keep you safe. The ceremony was conducted in Latin and English. Words about commitment and fidelity that felt both sacred and blasphemous given the circumstances. When the priest asked if I took this man as my husband, my voice barely shook as I said, I do. Dimitri's response was stronger, more certain. I do. Then he was sliding a ring onto my finger, platinum to match his grandmother's band, but this one studded with diamonds that caught the colored light and threw rainbows across our joined hands. His own ring was simple, unadorned platinum that looked almost severe against his scarred knuckles. You may kiss your bride. Dimitri's hand came up to cup my face, his thumb brushing my cheekbone in that gesture I was beginning to recognize as uniquely his. He lowered his head slowly, giving me time to pull away, but I didn't move. Couldn't move. His lips touched mine, soft at first, almost questioning. Then I made a small sound in the back of my throat, and something in him snapped. The kiss deepened, became demanding, claiming. His other hand sliding into my hair to hold me exactly where he wanted me. I could feel the barely leashed control in every movement, the violence he was holding back, the hunger that threatened to consume us both. When he finally pulled away, we were both breathing hard, and his eyes had gone dark with want. Mine, he whispered against my lips. My wife. The word sent electricity shooting down my spine. Wife. I was someone's wife, this dangerous, beautiful man's wife. The reception was held in the main dining room, transformed with candles and flowers into something almost magical. More people appeared, men in expensive suits who watched me with calculating eyes, women dripping in jewels who smiled with too many teeth. Dimitri's hand never left my waist, keeping me anchored to his side, his touch possessive and protective. Don't leave my sight, he murmured in my ear as we moved through the crowd. Not for a moment. Some of these people are allies. Some are not, and none of them need to know which category they fall into. How am I supposed to know who to trust? You trust no one but me. His fingers tightened on my waist. No one, Emma. Do you understand? I nodded, scanning the faces around us. They all looked the same to me. Rich, powerful, dangerous. How was I supposed to navigate this world? Dimitri. A woman approached, tall and stunning in a red dress that left little to the imagination. Her dark hair was swept up in an intricate style, and her smile was all predator. I heard rumors you'd gotten married, but I had to see it to believe it. Irina. Dimitri's voice went flat, cold. I thought I made it clear you weren't welcome here. Oh, come now. We were engaged once. Surely that earns me an invitation to your wedding. Her gaze slid to me, assessing and dismissive, though I must say, I didn't expect you to choose someone so ordinary. Heat flooded my cheeks. Dimitri's hand left my waist, moving to the small of my back, his touch burning through the thin silk. My wife, he said, each word sharp as a blade, is extraordinary. And you're leaving. Now. Dimitri. Now, Irina, or I'll have you removed. His voice dropped to something lethal. And we both know I don't make empty threats. She smiled, brittle and cold, before turning on her heel and stalking away. I could feel her hatred like a physical thing, pressing against my spine. Ex-fiancé? I asked quietly. A mistake I made years ago, before I understood the difference between ambition and loyalty. He guided me toward a quieter corner, away from the crowd. She wanted the power that came with my name. When I realized she was selling information to my enemies, I ended it. What happened to her? His expression went carefully neutral. She's still breathing, which is more than she deserves. I let her keep her life because she was useful once. That usefulness has expired. The casual way he discussed her fate should have terrified me. Instead, I felt a dark satisfaction knowing he'd chosen me over someone like her. Beautiful, sophisticated, born into this world, he'd chosen the invisible waitress. The rest of the reception passed in a blur of introductions I wouldn't remember, and conversations I barely followed. Dimitri kept me close, his touch constant, a hand on my back, fingers intertwined with mine, his body creating a barrier between me and everyone else. When we finally escaped to his bedroom, our bedroom now, I realized with a jolt. It was past midnight. I stood in the doorway, suddenly uncertain. The room was masculine but not cold. Dark wood furniture, navy bedding, windows that overlooked the gardens. A door on the far wall connected to the room I'd been using, making it clear he'd planned this, anticipated this moment. "You can use your room if you want," Dmitri said from behind me, close enough that I could feel his warmth but not touching. I meant what I said. I won't force anything. I turned to face him, this man who was now my husband, and saw the careful control in every line of his body. He wanted me. I could see it in the tension of his shoulders, the darkness of his eyes, the way his hands flexed at his sides like he was fighting the urge to reach for me. But he wouldn't. Not unless I gave permission. What if I don't want my own room? The words escaped before I could stop them, breathless and brave. Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. "Emma, I know this started as business, a contract, but you said it stopped being pretend for you." I stepped closer, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might break free. It stopped being pretend for me too. I don't know when or why, but somewhere between the restaurant and the boutique and tonight, I stopped pretending. He closed the distance between us in one stride, his hands cupping my face with a gentleness that contradicted everything I knew about him. "Tell me you understand what you're asking for." "I understand that I've spent my entire life being invisible, being forgotten. And when you look at me, I feel seen for the first time. I feel wanted." My hands came up to rest on his chest, feeling the rapid beat of his heart beneath expensive fabric. "I want this. I want you. Emma." My name was a prayer and a curse on his lips. "If we do this, there's no going back. I'm not a good man. I'm possessive and jealous and violent. Once I have you, truly have you, I won't let you go. Not in 6 months. Not ever." "Good." The word came out fierce, surprising us both, because I'm tired of being let go. He kissed me then. Not the controlled kiss from the ceremony, but something wild and desperate, like he'd been holding back for days and couldn't anymore. His hands moved from my face to my waist, pulling me against him, and I could feel the barely leashed violence in his touch, the hunger that matched my own. "The dress." He growled against my lips. "I need to see you. All of you." I turned, presenting my back to him, and felt his fingers find the hidden zipper. He drew it down slowly, tortuously, his knuckles brushing against my spine with each inch of revealed skin. When the dress pooled at my feet, leaving me in nothing but white lace, I heard his sharp intake of breath. Beautiful. His hands skimmed up my sides, mapping territory he was claiming as his own. My beautiful wife. I turned in his arms, reaching for his tie, fumbling with the knot until he covered my hands with his own. "Let me." He stripped with efficient grace, revealing a body marked by violence, scars across his ribs, a puckered bullet wound near his shoulder, evidence of a life lived in darkness. But he was beautiful too, all lean muscle and coiled power. He lifted me easily, carrying me to the bed, and laid me down like I was something precious, something worth protecting. Then he covered my body with his own, his weight pressing me into the mattress, grounding me in this moment. "Tell me if I'm too rough," he murmured, his lips trailing down my throat. "Tell me if you need me to stop. I won't." My hands threaded through his hair, pulling him closer. "I trust you." The admission seemed to undo something in him. His control fractured, and suddenly, we were a tangle of desperate touches and breathless kisses, his hands mapping every inch of my body while I learned the taste of his skin, the sounds he made when I touched him just right. When he finally claimed me completely, his eyes locked on mine. Ice blue and intense, and full of something that looked dangerously close to devotion. The pain was brief, swallowed by pleasure that built and built until I shattered beneath him, his name a broken prayer on my lips. "Mine," he groaned against my throat as he followed me over the edge. "My Emma. My wife. Mine." Afterward, we lay tangled together, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on my hip, while I listened to his heartbeat slowly return to normal. The room was dark except for moonlight streaming through the windows, painting everything in silver and shadow. "I didn't plan this," Dmitri said quietly. "Any of this. I was going to find someone suitable, make the arrangement, keep everything professional. But then I saw you, and everything I thought I knew about myself became irrelevant." I propped myself up on one elbow, studying his face in the dim light. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I'm not a man who believes in fate or destiny or love at first sight. I believe in strategy and survival, and taking what I want through force if necessary." His hand came up to cup my face, thumb brushing my swollen lips. "But when I saw you in that restaurant, something shifted. Like the universe was telling me I'd been looking in the wrong places my whole life." "That's terrifying," I whispered. "Yes." He pulled me down for a kiss, soft and claiming. "But you're not running." "No." I settled against his chest, feeling safer than I had in years, despite knowing exactly how dangerous this man was. "I'm not running." His arms tightened around me, and I felt him press a kiss to the top of my head. "Sleep, wife. Tomorrow we face the world as Mr. and Mrs. Volkov. Tonight you're just Emma, and I'm just a man who would burn everything down to keep you safe." I drifted off to the steady rhythm of his breathing, wrapped in warmth and security and the scent of his cologne. Somewhere in the house, I heard voices, guards making their rounds, security systems activating. We were in a fortress, surrounded by walls and weapons and men whose loyalty was purchased with blood. But in Dmitri's arms, I felt untouchable. I should have known that feeling wouldn't last. I woke to the sound of gunfire. My eyes snapped open, disoriented in the darkness. Dmitri was already moving, pulling on pants with practiced efficiency, his face set in lines of cold fury. "Stay here." He grabbed a gun from the nightstand. I hadn't even known it was there. "Lock the door behind me. Don't open it for anyone but me. What's happening?" "Kozlov." The name was a curse. "He's making his move. Stupid bastard thought a wedding would make me vulnerable." He leaned down, kissing me hard and fast. "I'll come back for you. I promise. But if I don't, if something happens, Elena knows what to do. She'll get you out. Dmitri..." But he was already gone, moving through the connecting door to my old room, and I heard the lock click into place. More gunfire echoed through the house, closer now, accompanied by shouting in languages I didn't understand. I sat frozen in the bed, clutching the sheets to my chest, listening to the sounds of violence below. This was real. This was my life now. Married to a man whose enemies would kill me to hurt him. Trapped in a fortress, under siege. What had I done? Block 5. Final. Time became meaningless in the darkness. Seconds stretching into minutes, minutes bleeding into hours. I pressed my ear against the door, trying to hear anything beyond my own thundering heartbeat. The gunfire had stopped, replaced by an eerie silence that somehow felt worse, then footsteps in the hallway, heavy, measured, wrong. "Mrs. Volkov?" A voice called through the door, accented, unfamiliar, dripping with false courtesy. "Your husband sent me to get you. It's safe now." Every instinct screamed danger. Dmitri had said not to open the door for anyone but him. He'd promised he would come back. "I don't believe you," I said, proud of how steady my voice sounded despite the terror coursing through my veins. Laughter, cold and cruel. "Smart girl. Volkov chose well." A pause. "But you should know. We have your husband. If you want to see him alive again, you'll open this door. Now." My hand hovered over the lock, trembling. Was he lying? Was Dmitri really captured? Or was this exactly the trap he'd warned me about? A phone slid under the door, lit screen showing a video. My stomach lurched. Dmitri, on his knees in what looked like the chapel, blood streaming from a cut above his eye. 3 men surrounded him, guns trained on his head. He looked directly at the camera, and even through the small screen, I could see the cold fury in his eyes. "Emma." His voice was rough but controlled. "Don't you fucking dare open that door. Do you hear me? Stay where you are." The video cut off with the sound of impact, someone hitting him. I heard him grunt in pain, and rage unlike anything I'd ever felt flooded through me. "You have 10 seconds, the voice said. Then I put a bullet in his head. 10, 9, 8. My hand was on the lock before I could think. I had to. I couldn't let them kill him. Whatever happened to me didn't matter. I couldn't be the reason Dimitri died. 7. 6. 5. I turned the lock. The door burst open, and rough hands grabbed me before I could scream. A cloth pressed over my mouth and nose, chemical sweet and suffocating. I struggled, trying to remember the self-defense moves I'd learned from YouTube videos, but my muscles went liquid, my vision darkening at the edges. The last thing I saw before unconsciousness claimed me was a man's face. Sharp features, dead eyes, and a smile that promised nightmares. When I woke, pain exploded behind my eyes. I was in a different room. Stone walls, no windows. A single bare bulb swinging overhead. My wrists were bound to a metal chair, zip ties cutting into skin already bruised from struggling. And across from me, also bound, was Dimitri. His face was a mess, split lip, swelling around his left eye, blood dried in his hair. But his eyes were clear, focused entirely on me with an intensity that bordered on feral. "Emma." Relief and fury warred in his voice. "Why didn't you listen? Why did you open the door? They were going to kill you." Tears burned my throat. "The video, I saw you. It was a trap, you foolish girl." But there was no real anger in his words, only something that sounded like anguish. They knew exactly what you'd do, knew I'd made the mistake of caring about someone, and that made you the perfect weapon. Touching, isn't it? Viktor Kozlov stepped out of the shadows, and I understood immediately why Dimitri considered him dangerous. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with silver threading through dark hair and eyes like chips of black ice. Handsome in a cruel way that made my skin crawl, the mighty Dmitri Volkov, brought down by a waitress. "Viktor." Dimitri's voice was cold enough to freeze blood. "This is between us. Let her go." "Let her go?" Kozlov laughed, moving closer to me. His finger traced along my jaw, and I jerked away, earning another laugh. "But she's the only reason you're still breathing. The moment I kill her, you'll fight like a demon. So she lives until I decide she's more useful dead. Touch her again, and I'll rip your throat out with my teeth." Bold words for a man tied to a chair. But Kozlov stepped back, apparently heeding the promise in Dimitri's eyes. "I've been planning this for months, waiting for you to show a weakness. When I heard about the marriage, I knew. Finally, you'd given me something to break." "My men will find us," Dimitri said. "They're probably already on their way." "Your men are dead or scattered. I brought 30 soldiers to your wedding, Dimitri. 30 men who owed you blood debts that I purchased. Your fortress was never as secure as you thought." Kozlov pulled out a knife, the blade catching the light. "Now, here's what's going to happen. You're going to sign over your territories, your contacts, your entire operation to me, and then I'm going to kill you both. But at least you'll die knowing you saved her from suffering. I'll never—" The knife flashed, and suddenly it was pressed against my throat, cold steel biting into skin. I froze, barely breathing. "Sign," Kozlov hissed, "or I open her throat right now." Dimitri's face went absolutely still, a terrible, deadly stillness that made Kozlov's hand falter slightly. "You're going to kill us anyway. Why would I give you anything? Because I'll make her death quick instead of spending days breaking her while you watch." The knife pressed deeper, and I felt warm blood trickle down my neck. "Sign, Volkov." "Dimitri, don't." My voice came out as barely a whisper. "Don't give him anything. I'm not worth—" "Shut up." Dimitri's eyes locked on mine, blazing with emotion. "You're worth everything. Don't you understand that yet?" To Kozlov. "If I sign, you let her go. That's the deal." "No deal. But I'll kill her fast. That's all you get." I watched something shift in Dimitri's expression. A calculation. A decision. His body relaxed slightly in the chair, shoulders dropping in apparent defeat. "Fine. Bring me the papers." Kozlov smiled, triumphant, and gestured to one of his men. The moment the knife left my throat, the moment Kozlov's attention shifted away from me, Dimitri moved. It happened so fast I almost missed it. His hands, which I'd thought were securely bound, suddenly snapped free, He'd been working the zip ties the entire time, cutting them against something sharp on the chair. He lunged forward with the chair still attached to his feet, using it as a weapon, slamming into Kozlov with enough force to send them both crashing to the ground. The gun went off, deafeningly loud in the enclosed space. For one terrible moment, I thought Dmitri had been shot, but it was Kozlov who screamed, clutching his leg as blood pooled beneath him. Dmitri's men poured through the door. How many? I couldn't count, and suddenly the room was chaos. Gunfire, and shouting and violence that made my earlier fear seem quaint. I squeezed my eyes shut, unable to watch, barely able to breathe, then gentle hands on my wrists, cutting through the zip ties. Elena's voice, soothing and urgent. "It's okay, sweetheart. You're safe now. Let's get you out of here." She helped me stand on shaking legs and guided me toward the door. But I couldn't leave. Not yet, not without knowing. Dmitri. He was standing over Kozlov, a gun trained on the other man's head. Blood covered his shirt. Some his, some not. He looked like something from a nightmare. Beautiful and terrible, and absolutely lethal. "Emma, go with Elena." His voice was rough, strained. "You don't need to see this. I'm not leaving you. This isn't negotiable. Neither am I." The words burst out of me, fierce and certain. "I'm your wife. For better or worse, remember? That means I don't run when things get hard. That means I stay." Something in his expression cracked. He looked at me like I was something miraculous, something he didn't deserve but couldn't let go of. "Then close your eyes, wife, and cover your ears." I did, but I couldn't block out the sound of the gunshot, the finality of it. When I opened my eyes again, Viktor Kozlov was dead on the floor, and Dmitri was walking toward me, limping slightly, blood still dripping from various wounds. "It's over," he said quietly, reaching for me with hands that shook slightly. "He's gone. You're safe." I should have been horrified, should have been traumatized by the violence I'd witnessed. Instead, I threw myself into his arms, holding him so tight I could feel his heartbeat against my chest. Alive, strong, real. "Don't ever scare me like that again," I whispered against his neck. "I could say the same to you." His arms tightened around me. "You opened the door. After I told you not to, after I made you promise he was going to kill you. I would have survived." He pulled back just enough to cup my face, his touch infinitely gentle despite the violence still clinging to him. "But if I'd lost you, Emma, there would be no coming back from that. Do you understand? You're not just my wife. You're the only thing keeping me human." The confession broke something open inside me. All the fear and adrenaline and desperate love I'd been trying to deny. "I love you," I said, the words tumbling out without permission. "I know it's insane. I know it's too fast. But I love you, Dmitri. I think I started loving you the moment you saw me when no one else did." His eyes closed, and when they opened again, they were bright with something that looked like tears. Emma Clark Volkov, my impossible, reckless, perfect wife. He kissed me, soft and claiming and full of promise. "I love you too. With everything I am, everything I was, everything I'll ever be. You're mine, and I'm yours. And nothing will ever change that. Even after 6 months? Fuck the contract." He kissed me again, harder this time. "You're not leaving me in 6 months. You're not leaving me ever. I'll tear up every paper, rewrite every agreement. This isn't business anymore, Emma. This is forever." The next few hours blurred together, paramedics checking us both over. Police who arrived and left with suspicious speed after terse conversations with Dmitri's lawyers. Cleanup crews who would erase all evidence of what had happened in that basement. I stayed glued to Dmitri's side through all of it, my hand in his, refusing to let go even when the paramedic tried to treat his wounds. Finally, we were back at the estate, in our bedroom. The door locked against the world. Someone had changed the sheets, removing all evidence of our wedding night, and laid out clean clothes. But neither of us moved to dress. We just held each other, processing everything that had happened. "What happens now?" I asked against his chest. "With Kozlov gone, does that mean—" "It means things will be complicated for a while. His organization won't go quietly. There will be power struggles, potential retaliation. More danger before things settle. He tilted my face up to meet his eyes. I can still get you out. Give you money, protection, a new identity somewhere Kozlov's people will never find you. It's not too late to choose a different life. Is that what you want? God, no. The words were raw, honest. I want you here, in my bed, in my life, driving me insane with your stubborn refusal to listen to my orders. I want to wake up every morning knowing you're safe under my protection. I want to spend the rest of my life making sure you never feel invisible again. Then that's what you'll have. I pressed closer, breathing him in. Gunpowder and blood and expensive cologne. The scent of survival. I'm not going anywhere, husband. You're stuck with me. Good. He rolled us so I was beneath him, his body covering mine protectively. Because I meant what I said. You're mine, Emma. And I take care of what's mine. He proved it that night, and every night after, in the way he held me through nightmares about basements and knives. In the way he personally oversaw every aspect of security, becoming almost paranoid about my safety. In the way he looked at me across crowded rooms, like I was the only person who mattered, the only thing worth protecting in his violent world. 3 months later, I quit the diner officially, though I'd been on indefinite leave since the wedding. Martha cried and made me promise to visit, and I did, every week, always with one of Dimitri's guards nearby, always with the knowledge that my old life was just that, old. 6 months later, we burned the contract in the fireplace, watching the pages curl and blacken while Dimitri held me from behind, his arms wrapped around my waist where new life was just beginning to grow. You're sure? He'd asked when I'd told him about the baby. This wasn't part of the deal. You don't have to. I want to. I'd turned in his arms, placing his hand on my still flat stomach. I want everything with you, Dimitri. The good, the bad, the dangerous. All of it. His hand had trembled against my skin. I don't deserve you. Probably not. I'd smiled, rising on my toes to kiss him, but you're stuck with me anyway. 1 year later, I stood in the same chapel where we'd gotten married, holding our daughter, Anastasia Elena Volkov, named for his grandmother and the woman who'd helped save my life. Dimitri stood beside me, his scarred hands cradling our baby, with a gentleness that still took my breath away. She's perfect, he whispered, his voice rough with emotion, just like her mother. She has your eyes, I observed. Ice blue, already sharp and observant at just 3 weeks old. God help us. But he was smiling, that rare, genuine smile he reserved only for me and now for our daughter. She's going to be trouble. She's a Volkov. Trouble is in her blood. He kissed my temple, his free arm pulling me close. Thank you, Emma, for saying yes when you should have run, for opening that door even though I told you not to, for loving me despite every reason not to. You saved me, you know, in every way a person can be saved. We saved each other, I corrected, leaning into his warmth. That's what marriage is supposed to be. Through the stained glass windows, I could see the gardens in full bloom. Spring replacing winter, life returning after darkness. Guards still patrolled the perimeter. Dimitri still conducted business I didn't always want to know about. The world was still dangerous, still complicated. But here, in this moment, with my husband's arms around me and our daughter sleeping peacefully between us, I felt something I'd never known before. I felt home. Not in the estate with its fortress walls and security systems. Not in the penthouse apartment, or the expensive clothes or the life of luxury I'd stumbled into. Home was Dimitri's heartbeat against my back. Home was the way he whispered my name in the darkness. Home was the promise we'd made to each other. Not the contract we'd signed, but the unspoken vow that had formed between a dangerous man and an invisible girl who'd found each other on Christmas Eve. I love you, I said, for the 1,000th time, and it still felt new. I love you, he answered, for the 1,000th time, and it still felt like salvation. Outside, the world continued spinning. Enemies plotted, allies watched. Life moved forward with all its complications and dangers. But in the chapel, surrounded by colored light and the scent of flowers, we were just a family. Imperfect, unconventional, forged in violence, and sealed with love. And that was more than enough. It was everything.